Our wrestling company has seen major changes in recent months here in this local to global journey on TEW IX with the Effganic Genesis mod, and things are only going to continue to intensify. While our company is beginning to turn the corner of progression, that is not going to come without challenges that could jeopardize everything we've built thus far. Welcome back everyone to the WHAM, the Wrestling Association of the Mid-South, as we continue to build our wrestling company to rival that of SPW Southern Pro Wrestling, the first and largest wrestling company as of August 1929, as that is where we are picking up here. And in this episode, we're going to continue to see the big names that we brought into the company continue to make an impact. We are going to finish out the decade today, so make sure you stick around. And first things first, one thing to address is that Levi Andrews, while he is currently off to film a movie, he has closed off any chances for any extended contract negotiations, as he feels that he has outgrown the WHAM. So that is just a bit of a confirmation that we are not going to see Levi Andrews around the Wrestling Association of the Mid-South anytime soon. And in more news, we have signed on Fritz Hattendorf, a German wrestler from POG Friedrich Herzog's company. He was a free agent. He is now joining with the WHAM. He's got a prickly personality type, but I've got some hopes for him. But he is going to lay low as of right now. And in more interesting news here, we see an article that states that Neil Allman has been identified as a rising star in CSW, and they are preparing a massive push for him, who they believe is the next big thing in wrestling. And we can see here his title history is exclusive to the WHAM, as he is a former heavyweight champion and Derby victor. So it'll be interesting to see what Neil Allman gets up to. And I've tried this in my backup databases. Neil Allman is not interested in exclusive deals. Given his mercenary personality type, I'm not willing to pay the amount that is going to take for him to sign an exclusive deal with us. So that leads me to just really hope that SPW never sends him an offer, because if I can't get him exclusive and SPW wants him, there's nothing I can do about that. And of course, his popularity in the Mid-South has bumped up to 28, and being one of our homegrown main event talents, that is something you love to see. And as I continue to peruse these articles day by day, we can see here that Fumihiko Onoda, former member of the WHAM, is getting really frustrated and is, quote, absolutely desperate to get back into the ring action. So one of these days we may have to just hire him on as a local worker, given that he is in the Mid-South. We did relocate him from his original home here into the Mid-South. Granted, it was his decision, but I've always been compelled to bring him in because of his stats and his fundamentals and physical ability. But for whatever reason, his primary and mental abilities, they just don't come together to bring in great in-ring performances. But it is something interesting to keep track of. Levi Andrews' contract has officially come to an end here in the WHAM, and since he is retired, we've got this automatic contract negotiation triggered. We're going to see if we can make the offer. I don't think it's going to work. And he actually accepts the offer. So we might be able to use Levi Andrews in some kind of capacity later on down the line. So we'll just see what happens. We're also notified that Dean Grunge's contract is coming to an end, and we are going to renegotiate to extend our man Dean Grunge. We'll extend him for another year, and I assume that he's going to accept. And funny enough, as we head into the next show, look who turns up. Fumihiko Onoda has turned up and requests to be allowed to hang out backstage. Of course, my man, I know your mental state is not the greatest, so you can come on in. Hermenegildo Ramirez turned up very late. We are going to fine him. Blue Mage and Bronson Fraley butted heads backstage and are furious with one another. Bryant Hines bringing up the locker room as he provided a crate of free drinks for everyone, and of course it is ice cold Coca-Cola. We don't have any major shows in the near future, so we are going to use the opportunity to inspire the locker room and boost up our ratings as well. And we get started with a great pre-show match, a triple threat between Woodrow Gunter, Benson Sandy, and Dean Grunge. Woodrow Gunter would come out of this one with the victory, and we know that Benson Sandy is undergoing a bit of an attitude shift into a bit of a more serious character, and Dean Grunge is really starting to find his footing as well, delivering some really good in-ring performances. So all in all, you see a segment rating of 42 to get our night started, and this is just a good feeling to get us going. And that good feeling continues as we get a hot segment to get us started. The show begins with Emilio and Gabriela Suarez in the ring, basking in the hailstorm of boos they are receiving from the crowd. Gabriela would get a microphone into the ring and begin to call out the crowd for their hypocrisies, stating that she was only looking out for her family when she helped Emilio win the championship. Gabriela continued, stating the crowd should be ashamed for booing the siblings, and that she begins to question if the fans in attendance even have the loyalty to aid their own families. These two would show off Emilio's junior heavyweight championship and pose in the ring for a while, but before leaving, Gabriela would urge everyone in attendance that if they disapprove of their actions, to be careful around who they came to this event with, because clearly honor and loyalty mean nothing to them. The siblings just speak out a little bit and basically lashing back at the crowd, stating the crowd should be ashamed of themselves for even booing Gabriela and Emilio, as they were just looking out for their family more or less. So they feel justified in their actions, and they don't necessarily love the fact that the crowd is booing them. But Gabriela is hot on the mic, so we had to get her out there, and of course an appearance from our junior heavyweight champion. And while this segment doesn't have a huge impact on the match itself, we will be determining the next challenger for Emilio Suarez in our main event this evening, but you'll have to see what that is. Our next match, we get a segment rating of 31, and we couldn't word this the best way, but Black Bull has been dismantled and kicked out of the Wellington Dynasty. Bronson Fraley comes into a 1-on-4 match with the odds very steep, not in his favor. However, the Wellington Dynasty turned their back on Black Bull. They would begin to beat down on Black Bull, allowing Bronson Fraley to pick up the victory. And Black Bull once again is being shunned and cast away from the group that he thought he belonged to. And we've got a segment after this that will shed a little bit of light, but as far as the numbers, segment rating at 31, Bronson Fraley with an in-ring performance of 39, Black Bull at 36, and Duke Wellington actually got up to a 30, Chuck at 25, and Angus down there at 15. In this segment, and following a shocking twist, Bronson Fraley, who was just at ends with the Wellington boys, celebrates with the wealthy heirs after an unexpected victory. Bronson Fraley would be embraced and celebrated as a new member of the Wellington Dynasty, with the brothers looking ecstatic as Black Bull, embarrassed and ashamed, made his way to the back after being betrayed once again. So it's kind of sad for our boy Black Bull. He once again felt like he belonged, and they turned his back on him. We're going to see the Wellington boys touch on this directly next month in our next show, but for now, we just see the introduction of Bronson Fraley into the Wellington Dynasty. And that'll also be touched on next month, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. The crowd is shocked, as what we thought Bronson Fraley was one of the largest oppositions to the Wellington Dynasty, he now becomes their muscle, so to speak. And we see Elijah Mays, RT Lincoln squaring off here. Elijah Mays, of course, coming out with the victory. And you could see here that Mays and RT Lincoln have pretty good chemistry, and it improved the match, so you'll love to see that. Elijah Mays at 51 and RT Lincoln at 30. Not a ton of story in this exact match, but we do have a segment to unpack it after the match, and we would see Elijah Mays would be caught by Riker Zucker, looking for a post-match interview following an impressive performance. I mistyped a little bit here, but Elijah Mays offers a simple statement. His size will not hold him back from capturing the heavyweight championship. He will become champion. If you haven't seen our last episode, go check it out. But Elijah Mays, who is a junior heavyweight, has his eyes on the heavyweight championship. So we get a segment rating of 45 here, and we're just going to continue to roll. And we would see Neil Allman picking up a victory over Blue Mage, and these two have squared off multiple times in the past, but Blue Mage, now that Friedrich Herzog has buddied up with Lights Camera Action, and Neil Allman won what was basically a #1 contendership match against Sebastian Morales last month in our previous episode, Neil Allman is now knocking at the door of Friedrich Herzog, and Elijah Mays is not the only one with his eyes on the heavyweight championship. So Blue Mage, acting as the very henchy henchman that he is, stood up to Neil Allman. However, he was brought down. We get a segment rating of 37, and this was almost going to be the main event, but I'm glad I didn't make it the main event because I knew we were going to kind of end up with, I kind of had a feeling that we were going to end up with this kind of rating. But moving on to the next segment, we would see a little bit more development, and Neil Allman and Friedrich Herzog come face to face in an intense encounter. Neil Allman doesn't back down while the champion displays no fear or hesitancy, although his backup is present after all. Blue Mage collected himself until Friedrich Herzog would put him back down with a huge thunderous slam. JP Cromwell is surprised by this action, and Herzog makes a comment to his henchman that is not picked up by the crowd or any microphones. This would leave Neil Allman shocked, and while there are plenty of questions that now need answers, Friedrich Herzog and JP Cromwell leave the ring together, without Blue Mage and without physical confrontation with Neil Allman. So, again, it seems that the stables are moving around and changing, and Blue Mage may have just been kicked out of lights camera action here. We saw Black Bull get ditched, and now we may see Blue Mage. So it's a bad day to be a colorful noun, I tell you what. But overall, we get a segment rating of 41 in this, and that's some good progression, but we've still got our main event to get to. And that main event gets a stupendous match rating, and I think this is the best match that the Wham has ever seen. This is a 5-man over-the-top rope elimination match. Barnabas Beef Wellington was in his bag for this one, and we are seeing this kind of match for the very first time. And in a bit of a surprise, Hermenegildo Ramirez would be the one to come out on top, with big names like Albie Dewberry, Joe Cartwright, Christopher Hartwell, and even Wayne Blankenship. Hermenegildo Ramirez, the newest face in the junior heavyweight division, is the one that gets his shot at Emilio Suarez. And we did want these guys to go out and steal the show, and in order of elimination we would see Wayne Blankenship, and then in a surprise, Albie Dewberry, who was actually eliminated by Joe Cartwright. And in that moment, there would be a bit of tension between Albie Dewberry and Joe Cartwright. Albie Dewberry was amazed, flabbergasted if you will, that he was taken out of this match. He grabbed the attention of Joe Cartwright, but Joe Cartwright said, "This is the spirit of competition, brother. I'm just doing what I gotta do to get my match, to get my championship rematch." All in all, this was enough to allow Christopher Hartwell to then eliminate Joe Cartwright. So then it brought us down to Ramirez and Hartwell, and Ramirez would be the one to come out on top, and it seemed to be the right decision because Hermenegildo Ramirez had an in-ring performance of 64. My goodness. These numbers are actually starting to look passable regardless of the era, and that is something that is exciting. So Hermenegildo Ramirez makes a name for himself in a big match. And that's going to wrap us up and leave us at an overall rating of 49. So we had a really strong end to the show. However, our bit with Neil Allman and Blue Mage wasn't the strongest match. Bronson Fraley and the Wellington Dynasty. I'm actually going to give the Wellington boys some props for getting up into the 30s for this one. Granted, they've got Bronson Fraley, who's a former heavyweight champion, helping him out, but I digress. And I'm feeling good about that show. We're actually going to praise Bronson Fraley because he did a good job. And I'm going to praise Dean Grunge as well, and these turned out good. Our financial report sees us gain $239 from this show. We're going to have to see what happens at the monthly expenses. I know I said I was going to hold off on the pre-show matches, and I just did it again this month, but they're just so attractive. I want to get my guys some reps, get them experience, you know what I'm saying? And Dean Grunge accepted our 1-year offer, so he will be sticking around. And as we get into the next event, we're wasting no time here, but we do have the option to do the hardline stance, and given the positive that it provides, I'm willing to run the risk of the negative of whoever it may be with a bad enough morale of walking out. I don't think any of my major players have really bad morale, so I'm going to go ahead and give the hardline stance a try, and hopefully no one walks out. And no one did walk out, so we're grateful for that. And as we continue on, we are foregoing any pre-show matches today as we have rang up quite the bill for our roster. We're going to see just how we did that. But the show opens up with Riker Zucker ringside interviewing Benson Sandy. Riker Zucker looks for some clarity as to why Benson Sandy has displayed such a drastic shift in attitude. Benson Sandy claims that he is done being the laughingstock of the company, and he feels his ability in the ring have gone underappreciated for too long. Benson Sandy promises to continue to make anyone who has laughed at him in the past wish they hadn't. This would then lead to an open challenge from Benson Sandy, though he would be surprised to see who would answer the call. Segment rating at 36, and who answered it? It would be Woodrow Gunter coming back for more. And you remember a couple months ago, if you're following along with us, just a few months ago, these two had a match and it went south, and the ref ended up having to call a disqualification on Benson Sandy. So this one was a wild brawl, and that brought the ratings down for both of these guys, so we only see a segment rating of 29. Not great as far as numbers go. But Benson Sandy, Woodrow Gunter, they just brawl it out. This one is a fight, and they fight until they get counted out. They both get counted out. We're not going with the catches can go over the top rope, you're disqualified kind of rule. That's not something that I acknowledged from the jump, so I'm not going to start acknowledging it now. But so they spill out to the side, to ringside, and they get counted out. They went through the middle ropes anyway, so we'll look for a loophole there. I'm not too privy on the rules in that aspect, but I digress. The match gets called out, thrown out as a draw, no contest, and these two just continue to brawl all the way up the entrance ramp, through the curtain, and into the back, out of audience view. So like we said, segment rating of 29, in-ring performances of 31 from both of these guys. We're counting on the wild brawl being the aspect that really brought it down. But we do see a little bit of improvement from the Wellington boys, and when you get improvement from the Wellington boys, that is a little alarming. But let's go ahead and dive in. The Wellington brothers are prepared to shed some light on their partnership with Bronson Fraley. Chuck Wellington takes the mic and explains that it became clear that Black Bull wasn't capable of providing sufficient protection. Chuck then glances at his tag team championship belt and mentions that the Wellington brothers need to be protected more than ever, as a small tag team tournament will take place to determine the challengers to the titles. Chuck then begins to elaborate on Bronson Fraley, who the cocky Wellington heir praises for his strength and determination. And despite a rocky beginning, the wealth that the Wellingtons carry is enough to allow Fraley and the Wellingtons to see eye to eye and let bygones be bygones. Chuck then hints at big plans for all the Wellington dynasty, promising Bronson Fraley will make a fine face of the company once more. So, Bronson Fraley, he turned his beef with the Wellington boys, and that animosity turned into admiration from the Wellingtons, because they were able to see the power that Bronson Fraley held as he just knocked down Black Bull, who was their personal protector. And they were able to negotiate, strike up a deal with Bronson Fraley, and basically sponsor Bronson Fraley for his next championship run. And now Bronson Fraley has got the backing of the Wellington boys, as long as Bronson Fraley is able to uphold his part and ensure that the Wellington boys are able to succeed in the areas that they're looking to succeed in. So we get a segment rating of 33. The crowd was liking this one, and Bronson Fraley is officially a member of the Wellington dynasty. And that would spill into this next match. You see here, we brought the boy in, Fumihiko Onoto. And we felt bad for him, and we saw him on the local workers tab. He was $20, and we brought him in for the night to take a big loss to the Wellington dynasty. And this one was definitely an emotional play here. I wanted to give some shout out to Onoto, because I was the one that brought him into the States, and now he's stranded away from home and he's out of a job. Segment rating at 23. The Dynasty Boys get a victory over Fumihiko Onoto, with Chuck Wellington getting the pin. Bronson Fraley at 35, Onoda at 21, Duke at 27, Chuck 24, and Angus at 13. So this match wasn't much more than a confirmation that Bronson Fraley is in fact rolling with the Dynasty. We haven't had the best ratings tonight, and it's unfortunate, but we do see it get better with a segment rating of 38 as Neil Allman and Elijah Mays take on Friedrich Herzog and JP Cromwell, and we would actually see Elijah Mays and Neil Allman take the loss after Friedrich Herzog is able to take advantage of an interference from Fritz Hattendorf if you're the man that we just signed at the start of the episode. And so as far as our numbers go, Elijah Mays with a great performance of 50, Neil Allman and Friedrich Herzog at 48, and JP Cromwell down there at 25. Blue Mage, who is ringside, although he is hurt, he is not doing great. He does attend this match, so we get a little bit of a bonus there. However, the negative, we get a strike for Herzog and Blue Mage being an awkward pairing. And the segment rating of 38 is not the strongest, and again, this was a case of I almost made this the main event for the story, but for the numbers and the ratings, we held back. This would just provide a little bit more clarity as Friedrich Herzog celebrates the tag team victory with new faction member Fritz Hattendorf. JP Cromwell would initially show some reluctancy and confusion, however he would eventually come around and join the celebration despite some underlying hesitancy still there. Segment rating of 30, and Fritz has got to get introduced to the American audience a little bit more, but he does have some decent statistics, so we hope to see some big things from our old boy Fritzy. In our main event, we do see the segment rating bump right back up as we do have a great main event between Emilio Suarez putting his Junior Heavyweight Championship on the line against Hermenegildo Ramirez. And after a Gabriela Suarez interference, Emilio would come out victorious here. Unfortunately, Hermenegildo was really off of his game, so he only got an in-ring performance of 41. Emilio was way up there at 50, and a really strong way to end out the show with a segment rating of 47. So not much to say here, a good match that was put on until Gabriela Suarez became the difference maker in this match, allowing the avenue for Emilio Suarez to take advantage and successfully defend his championship. And one final segment to end the show, as the Suarez siblings are once again reveling in their actions, while the crowd shows their clear disapproval. The sinister siblings continue to mock the crowd while making the claim they are just looking out for their family, ignoring their blatant abuse of the rules and the presence of a ringside manager, for the 1920s anyway, because the managers weren't necessarily that notorious for ringside shenanigans. But we got a segment rating of 53 here to end us off for the night. Let's see how we did for the entire show. And we get a 44. Not bad. As long as we're staying north of 40, I'm okay with that at this point in time. We had a crowd of 125. Can we jump in size and popularity? We will see. We're praising Blue Mage and Woodrow Gunter just to keep them happy. And we do profit $142, though we did have to shell out over $1,000 for our wrestlers and employees. And we do see that popularity increase from 24 to 25. What a beautiful sight. Diego Berrigan has been angry ever since Emilio Suarez arrived to the WAM, and we've now been able to build up a few character ideas, and I want to try to use a character idea on Mr. Diego Berrigan. We got a near certainty and a safe bet. We're going to use the near certainty first and hope that does not backfire. It was a success. He's still angry, and we're going to try to use another one. Can we get 2 in a row? Yes, we do, and we dropped him down to just annoyed. And he did have a negative effect on the backstage, and you can see that it has now gone away. So I should have shown you beforehand, but I didn't. But now we have turned his personality from a negative influence to a positive influence, and that's big because he is a class clown, so we want to assume that he's got a positive effect on the morale. And we are once again ready to go with another edition of the Amazing Grappling Spectacle, the 57th edition, and our show opens up with Benson Sandy and Woodrow Gunter getting to go one-on-one in a no-holds-barred match, and these two were not held back by countouts, any kind of disqualifications, just allowed to get their aggression out on one another. And after a brutal and intense match, Woodrow Gunter would come out on top on Benson Sandy. Woodrow Gunter with an in-ring performance of 39, while Benson Sandy is at 37. Benson Sandy certainly is not going to be thrilled about this outcome, but Woodrow Gunter, the big-time free agent, comes through and picks up a big victory. Segment rating of 39 to get us started, and the show starts with a crowd that is hot and rising. And we do not get the best rating in our next match. Not only was August Washburn rusty, but he was also really off of his game, resulting in an in-ring performance of 15, almost as low as Angus Wellington's 13. but Bronson Fraley and the Wellington dynasty picks up a victory, continues to build some momentum and some more popularity for our Wellington boys, as Fraley turns in a dominant performance, and we just get a segment rating at 24 here. Moving to the next match, we've got Dean Grunge and Diego Berrigan teaming up to take on RT Lincoln and Randy Edson, and this is the first match of a small tag team #1 contendership tournament featuring 4 teams, where the winner will be the #1 contender to the Wellington Dynasty's Tag Team Championships. We see Dean Grunge, the star of the match here, at an in-ring performance of 40, RT Lincoln at 35, Diego Berrigan at 21, and Randy Edson at 19. I think Berrigan and Edson suffered because this was a wild brawl and they are not the best of brawlers, but you know, match aims and everything. But regardless, Dean Grunge and Diego Berrigan pick up the victory, and they are able to move on in this tournament and get one step closer to challenging for the Openweight Tag Team Championships. We get a segment rating of 32 in this next bit, and we see Albie Dewberry and Joe Cartwright meet one another in the ring, as Albie Dewberry wants to confront Cartwright personally to say that Cartwright got lucky when he eliminated Dewberry from the #1 contendership match last month. Cartwright welcomed a challenge and stated he can compete anytime to crown the true #1 contender. This dialogue would be cut short as Wayne Blankenship and Christopher Hartwell would interrupt the two, rushing the ring and snatching the microphone away. Blankenship and Hartwell would express they are sick and tired of always hearing about Dewberry and Cartwright, stating their time is past and it's time for new contenders who can get the job done to step forward. This would turn into an impromptu tag team match between our junior heavyweights, and of course Albie Dewberry and Joe Cartwright would just shine with great in-ring performances. However, Wayne Blankenship and Christopher Hartwell would actually be the ones to pick up the victory, as Christopher Hartwell picks up a pin with a roll-up after Albie Dewberry and Joe Cartwright have some miscommunication, taking Dewberry out and setting up Christopher Hartwell to take advantage. So we get a great segment rating of 44 with a strong tag team match. And like I said, on the back of Cartwright and Dewberry, 55 and 52 respectively, and then Blankenship's down at 27, Christopher Hartwell at 32. So this match really shows you who the class of the junior heavyweight division is. However, Christopher Hartwell actually picks up the victory and makes a big statement. So moving on to the next segment, and we get a segment rating of 36 here, and we would see Friedrich Herzog and his crew make their way out to the ring, once again flaunting the heavyweight championship that is around the waist of Herzog. Friedrich would make a public statement to his goons. He will not accept failure. He then turns his attention to Blue Mage, to which he states that Blue Mage has been nothing but a disappointment since Herzog took over this group. As Herzog finishes his tirade on Blue Mage, Fritz Hattendorf begins a beatdown on Blue Mage, in which Herzog would then join in. JP Cromwell refused to take part in the beatdown until Herzog got right into his face. The intimidation tactic worked as Cromwell would give in and join the attack on his former ally. This act of brutality would serve as the confirmation that Blue Mage had been officially removed from the group. Segment rating of 36, Friedrich Herzog, the new leader of Lights Camera Action, taken out the original first bodyguard of Levi Andrews, and we see a shift, and JP Cromwell wasn't exactly about attacking his former partner. However, Friedrich Herzog gets in his face, the champion intimidates his new bodyguard, and Cromwell eventually comes around and joins in on the beatdown. This would then be a continuation of the same segment, as Elijah Mays and Neil Allman would then rush the ring, preventing any more damage to Blue Mage. Friedrich Herzog and his goons would flee the ring area, quickly making their way towards the curtain. As Neil Allman and Elijah Mays looked on at the champion, Elijah Mays would shockingly apply a guillotine choke, bringing Neil Allman down in a statement that he will not be overlooked as a contender, despite his size. So a big swerve here. Elijah Mays, not necessarily with a heel turn, he is kind of a tweener anyway, just kind of rough around the edges a little bit, but taking out Neil Allman, just reinforcing that he wants a shot at Friedrich Herzog. Segment rating of 46 to finish out the show. So not the best match-wise, but we do get some big segments to move along some stories, and of course our junior heavyweights delivered with a great match in the main event. Moving on, we're praising Joe Cartwright and Albie Dewberry. We only profit $160 on this one, and we stay at 25 popularity as expected. And we just got the heads up that Bronson Fraley's contract is now within 30 days, and we do not want any kind of shenanigans to happen here, so we are going to once again re-sign him to an exclusive handshake offer at the same pay figures of $30 per show for 2 years. And as expected, one of our golden boys has accepted, and he will be sticking around. In a bit of very good news, Hermenegildo Ramirez has chosen to relocate and now resides in the Mid-South, so that is another wrestler that will not have to pay for travel, and he is a great wrestler who has been a really phenomenal addition to the roster so far. So we are just going to take the next step and offer him an exclusive handshake deal to prevent SPW from doing any kind of poaching, because this man has been money so far, and we'll send him a 2-year contract. And good news, he has accepted, and Hermenegildo Ramirez will be sticking around the WAM for the foreseeable future. And it is time for the final edition of the Amazing Grappling Spectacle of the 1920s. We are ready to say goodbye to the decade and getting ready to step in to a new decade of the 1930s, but we've got this last event, and we do have a pre-show match. And I wanted to get Dean Grunge and Hermenegildo Ramirez back in action. And there's a clear reason for that, and that is because Hermenegildo Ramirez has got the juice, and you can see here an in-ring performance of 57 helps bring a segment rating of 41 to get us started, even though it is just a pre-show match. But great work here by these two, and Hermenegildo Ramirez continues to make a case for himself that despite taking a loss for the title just a few months ago, he might be poking his head right back into that title picture. Our first match of the night is actually a #1 contendership for the Junior Heavyweight Championship. We would see Christopher Hartwell and Wayne Blankenship. They would pick up a very surprising victory last month in a tag team match against Dewberry and Cartwright, and thus earning them the opportunity to compete for the #1 contendership. Christopher Hartwell comes out on top here with an in-ring performance of 33 opposed to Blankenship's 31, and we will see Christopher Hartwell challenging Emilio Suarez for the Junior Heavyweight Championship here in the future. Segment rating at 31, and we will move on. And Sebastian Morales once again competing here in the WAM. This is the final appearance on his contract as of right now, but this man has been becoming quite familiar around here. And I enjoy having Sebastian Morales because this man puts in in-ring performances of 58, and I can always appreciate that. And Bronson Fraley at 41, Duke Wellington at 34, Chuck Wellington at 27, and Angus at 15. So great job for Duke Wellington getting all the way up there at 34, and Sebastian Morales just head and shoulders above everyone else and looking good out there. Unfortunately, he comes up short as Bronson Fraley using the reinforcement of the Wellington brothers to secure a victory. Segment rating at 37, and this is just an exclamation point of the power and capabilities of Bronson Fraley paired up with the Wellington dynasty. And knowing Bronson Fraley back from the Frank Norris days, he has always been one to coddle up with the authority figure and kind of get on his good side. So we'll see more developments as things continue to progress. We'll get another segment rating of 37, and we would see Elijah Mays make his way to the ring with haste and destructive intent, as he is filled with rage after finding out he is not included in tonight's heavyweight championship match. Elijah Mays quickly goes after the Wellington brothers, getting some strikes in before Bronson Fraley takes the much smaller man down. Despite Elijah Mays' capabilities, Bronson Fraley overpowers the MMA fighter and gains control in an unforgiving hold. Chuck Wellington would then gather himself and viscerally declare Elijah Mays won't be sniffing the heavyweight title scene, as he simply does not make weight. The Wellington brothers then assert their own dominance on Elijah Mays, ultimately leaving the fiery competitor down, getting a segment rating of 37, and as stated here, we've got a heavyweight championship match. Elijah Mays is not part of it, and the reason for that being he does not make weight to qualify to compete for said title. So of course, he's not happy about that. He makes a statement. He goes after the Wellington boys, and Bronson Fraley does what Black Bull could not and protects the Wellington boys from an assailant, for lack of a better term. And we will see more developments from those guys, and we get a tag team match between Lights Camera Action, that is Fritz Hattendorf and JP Cromwell, taking on Joe Cartwright and Albie Dewberry. And Fritz got penalized bad because he's got extremely low popularity here in the States. We still got to build him up a little bit more. JP Cromwell up at an in-ring performance of 30, Fritz at 15, Albie Dewberry at 48, and Joe Cartwright at 47. And we've got an interesting finish here as JP Cromwell ultimately leaves Fritz Hattendorf high and dry as the legal man and gets himself counted out, kind of firing back in his own way, being the detriment to Lights Camera Action and getting them eliminated from this tag team contendership tournament, as JP Cromwell basically stating that he does not agree with what happened to Blue Mage. And despite Fritz Hattendorf and JP Cromwell being the much larger men in this match, Joe Cartwright and Albie Dewberry, the junior heavyweights, would come out on top. We would just get a segment rating of 38, and that's got much to do with Fritz Hattendorf, I've got to imagine. So there's a little bit of tension going on between Cartwright and Dewberry, and they've got this competitive spirit kind of thing going on. Think like Brock Lesnar, Kurt Angle almost, but now they're going after the tag team titles. If they're not competing for the junior heavyweight championship, the competitive spirit within them is bringing them towards the open weight tag team championships. So, moving on, our main event of the night is a heavyweight championship match, and Friedrich Herzog would come out on top against Neil Allman. And we didn't get any specific notes about it, but Fritz Hattendorf playing his part at ringside. However, no JP Cromwell in sight, and we would see Neil Allman get real close to taking down the heavyweight champion and securing the championship. However, he would come up short. We would get a segment rating of 44, and of course Elijah Mays, not mentioned here, but very much unhappy about not being included in this match. All in all, we would see an overall rating for the show of 42. Strong main event and a really strong pre-show match as well, but I don't think that helps us too much. But we did deliver at the end of the night in that heavyweight championship match, and that is important. And for that reason, we'll go ahead and praise our main eventers. We profit $300 from this show, great ticket sales at $14.90, great ticket sales of $1,496, and we stay at 25 popularity. And after getting out of the show, we simulated right up to the first of the new year to get prepared for the next episode, but we've got some juicy messages here. As you can see, RT Lincoln has handed his notice and will be leaving the Wham, so we are losing RT Lincoln. That is unfortunate. And not only that, but Benson Sandy as well has handed in his notice and will be leaving the Wham. That's rather unfortunate because we were just starting to turn Benson Sandy around and get his character progression a little bit. However, Joel Cartwright has less than 30 days remaining on his contract, so we are going to send him a brand new exclusive handshake contract that will last. We're going to try 3 years and see if he accepts it. And Diego Berrigan as well, we're going to send him a 1-year contract. And we'll wait for the next episode to hear back on these contract offers. And of course, we'll check in on the end of the year awards as well. Little spoiler there with that avatar that you can see in the back, and you should know who that is by now. But make sure you tune into the next episode, as we've got the Derby and the Spectacle of Amazing Grapples, the biggest time of the year for the Wham. But huge shout out to the real ones on Patreon. You guys are awesome, and your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you to all the other Patreon members, and as for everyone else, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Take it easy.